we have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
Good evening, folks. You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper.
Is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
Time, weather, and highways.
Veteran of 3 foreign wars, entrepreneur, and warrior poet, Tony Arterburn takes on the issues facing our country, civilization, and planet. This is the Arterburn radio transmission.
Episode 508. This is the Arterburn radio transmission. I am your host, Tony Arterburn. I'm broadcasting in defiance of globalist goblins, the neocons. Hey, I've been broadcasting in defiance of neocons for 11 plus 12 years now. And it seems that we are winning somewhere in the ideological battle. Somewhere, I think there's a high water mark. We'll maybe get into that a little bit today. Definitely something shifted. But it's the neocons in the New World Order right here on the Arterburn radio transmission. I'm joined by my co-pilot and co-host, Beans the Brave, who is just off camera. She's keeping my house in Denison, Texas, safe from woodland creatures and intruders, bad vibes, all that good stuff. We love Beans. Was on the David Knight show talking with Travis Knight today, and he asked a couple of great questions, and I got me to thinking because I noticed something. He must have noticed it too. We'll talk a little bit about that today, which is the markets. What happened to the markets during the your preview, your free sample of World War III? And things seem to have calmed down a bit, but that can be deceiving, folks. If you know anything about history, if you know anything about geopolitics, if you know anything about the conspiracy theory of history, then you're never, ever satisfied with whatever these kind of outcomes are. You're always asking more questions, and questions, as we have found out, ladies and gentlemen, questions are the answer. The more questions, the better. You got to question everything. And that's the times in which we live. So yeah, there's nothing to report other than there's nothing to report, right? This is something I read yesterday about the Hegelian dialectic, and I've been talking about that for years, but I thought I'd retouch on that because we're getting, I think, primed for something much bigger. This is my gut level. Something's not right. There's a disturbance in the force. There's a glitch in the matrix. And that's what we're watching. And if you go back, and people throw that term around in my line of work and alternative media about the Hegelian dialectic, but it comes from Friedrich Hegel, who was a 19th century philosopher. He believed in many different philosophical mashups with history and how it worked. He influenced people like Karl Marx. And it's like the flow of history would be that there's an idea, which is thesis, and that out of that would be presented the antithesis, so antithesis. So you have thesis, antithesis, and that they would collide and produce synthesis. And that's the dialectic, like the both sides bringing their best argument for their view of the future. And something interesting, I believe, happened in the 19th century where this was discovered as a phenomenon, kind of like the cyclical view of history. This was discovered as a phenomenon that actually does work. I mean, it's like if you want to get to, Y, like if A, divided by B equals C, then you want to get to this one last portion. If you want to get to the end result, if you want this one thing and you have to blend these two things together, well, you have to begin with the end in mind. And I think that's what we saw during the 20th century. So this has actually worked for some of the planners. I believe that's why you had people fund Karl Marx, and that's why the world's richest people funded communism, because it was such an outlier. It was such a antithesis to free market capitalism and the gold standard and everything that the 19th century produced. But what happened in the 19th century was interesting to watch. You had the rise of the Populist Party at the end of the 1800s in America, and all over the world there was a political backlash from the top down. Like they called them robber barons. And the Jack London, who was an author, wrote The Call of the Wild. This was back in people don't write as much as they should about this time in American history, but there was such a disparity between workers and the oligarchs who ran everything that I think they created this antithesis, this boogeyman. They created something so that they could use it as a controlled opposition, and that would eventually bleed together. So you have, capitalism versus communism, but not really. And you have like the American imperialism versus the Soviet imperialism, and you blend that together and you get what we have today, which is a race for centralized control of everything. And Bill Cooper called it a one world totalitarian socialist government. So I see that today in this foreign policy that we have. It's like this massive, juxtaposition between 2 points, and then nothing happens really of substance, and nothing happened yet. By the way, you can't count out anything at this point. They may seem quiet, but I'm sure they seem quiet. And like I told Travis Knight this morning, they may have seemed quiet in the summer of 1914 as well, if you know anything about World War I and how that kicked off. And a lot of it was just a domino effect of treaties and things that were set into motion from things like even the Kaiser, in World War I, he was trying to bring his troops back and he couldn't stop it. Like once it had just started going, he couldn't stop it. And some of these things, war especially, has an energy all of its own. It's an organic phenomenon in many ways. So you have to watch that. But I think we're being primed for something, and look out for that. Like if you wanted to, if you want to plan out, because we're midway through the Agenda 2030 decade. I knew this when I hosted the first broadcast on InfoWars of the new decade of 2020, because David Knight asked me to host. It was last minute. I went in, and it was just after Trump had assassinated the General Soleimani. And I remember like the gravity of the situation. This was the Iranian general. The hashtag was World War III. But it was only about 30 days later, 45 days later, that we were primed and getting ready for a lockdown with an executive order. And so it was World War III, just a different kind of war. And that was, I think, a kickoff to this decade, ladies and gents. This is Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, the Great Reset. And I've always thought that just deep in my bones, like it's a hurry up offense to get as much done in this decade as you can. So we're halfway through. And there's these milestones. They set goals. They want, if you look at the Agenda 2030, the sustainable living, they want to create the 15-minute cities and all of this stuff. Trump calls them freedom cities. But they want to create this control grid, not only with the currency, but the way you live and all this. They use it under the guise of sustainability. And the ultimate, I think, director of any of these projects that these controllers have. If you go back to prior to World War I, the Carnegie Foundation, they were looking at how do we implement these socialist policies, because it's the wealthiest people in the world generally will fund some kind of socialism. It's kind of a head fake because they get to control it. It's why the rich always fund communism, and it blows people's minds. They don't really understand that. I was never taught that as a kid. You have to go find that out for yourself. But the Carnegie Foundation, and you can go look this up, they were working hard on trying to, how do we get all these societal, these progressive ideas, how do we get them implemented? This was like one of the original think tanks. And so to a person, the panel realized that the best and fastest way for them to achieve their goals for top-down change would be a war. And so that's the first question that they answered. And then the second was, how do we get into one? So that's where I start looking, is because all of it's so much of a script. How do we get into one? And you can certainly see that now. All right, folks, we're going to jump into some headlines. I definitely want to cover some precious metals headlines. There's my friend Junkyard sent me a link of what's going on in Texas. We'll cover that. There's a little bit I want to read about silver, just kind of putting your mindset for what fiat has done, the erosion of the purchasing power of the dollar. As a matter of fact, one of the headlines on Drudge today is like, no love for the dollar. The dollar is losing. De-dollarization is just happening, folks. So whether this, what's going on with Iran, or what's going on with Israel, what's going on with Russia or China, whatever it does, these are all things that are important to some degree, but the major theme is the macro. And I want to talk to you about, there's an article up on Zero Hedge just showing you, because we get lost in that, what's happened to the purchasing power of the dollar. And this is natural news. Let me bring this article up. I want to do this, and then I've got a recap of what happened in the last week. My friend Donald Jeffries wrote a great article up on LouRockwell.com, and that'll take me a minute or two to go through, but I definitely want to do that with you. We have some sponsorship news I want to get to, and your comments. Definitely want to get to your comments. I'll be watching for that over on YouTube and X. All right, let me put this up on the screen. Go. Yeah, this is natural news. A Texas gold revolution is underway, but the conversion of gold into digital currency just hand control over to the state. Well, this is the question I asked a couple of years ago. Let me see. My mouse over here. Thank you. Governor Greg Abbott's signing of House Bill 1056 makes it a historic shift in monetary policy, positioning Texas as the first state to create a functional electronic payment system backed by gold and silver. Proponents hail it as a bold step towards financial sovereignty, freeing Texans from both the Federal Reserve's inflationary fiat system. But underneath the triumphant rhetoric lies a critical question. Is this true monetary freedom, or a clever Trojan horse that ultimately surrenders private gold reserves to state control? The bill's passage comes as Texas aggressively positions itself as a future economic powerhouse, investing heavily in AI, robotics, and space exploration while leveraging its vast natural resources. But with the great power comes great scrutiny and skepticism. While the state frames HB 1056 as a victory for constitutional money, it may be the first step towards centralized control over citizens' precious metals, converting hard assets into digital credits under government oversight. This is, I think, very much a good question to ask, because I asked this, and we'll get into a little bit of this, what this means with Texas having, and this isn't the same thing as what they proposed with a gold-backed Texas-based digital currency. It's not exactly the same thing, but we'll get into that. Texas becomes the first state to implement a practical gold-backed payment system, allowing citizens to spend precious metals via debit cards and mobile apps. The Texas Bullion Depository, already holding $400 million in metals, will serve as the backbone of this system, raising concerns about state custody of private assets. Well, it's a good concern. Supporters claim it's a biblical and constitutional return to sound money, while banking interests warn of consumer risk and systemic disruption. Implementation will be phased with full functionality by 2027 unless competing bills, SB 665 and 1049, alter the landscape. The move aligns with Texas' broader push for economic independence, fueling speculation about eventual secession. Well, I'd love that conversation, but I don't know that that's a true political reality. It'd have to love that conversation. We can start there, but I think where our politics has a long way to go. As we've seen the interview with Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson, we're not dealing with mental giants. The gold standard rebooted or a digital trap? At first glance, it seems revolutionary. Texans can now deposit gold or silver into a state-run depository and access its value electronically, bypassing the need to sell metals for depreciating dollars. How am I supposed to buy groceries with a gold bar? Asked Rep. Mark DeRazio, San Antonio, the bill's architect. His solution: convert bullion into spendable digital currency backed 1 for 1 ounce by physical metals. He says, but here's the catch. The state holds the gold. Citizens trade direct ownership for digital claims, a system critics compare to central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, where governments, not individuals, control the underlying assets. While the plan appears to restore sound money and allow individuals to tap into their stores of wealth, the plan really represents another form of state-managed money. Once metals enter the depository, reclaiming them in physical form could become bureaucratically difficult. If you've ever dealt with anything with the state, yes. Historically, gold's value lies in its independence from government manipulation. The Federal Reserve can't print it. Inflation can't erode it. But if Texans surrender their bullion to a state-run digital system, they exchange that autonomy for convenience, a trade-off that could leave them vulnerable for future political and policy shifts. Well, it's an interesting question, and I applaud. I think we had Kevin Freeman on. He wrote Pirate Money on my Wise Wolf podcast and the Wise Wolf Golden Crypto Show. And I put it up on Paratruther as well. Mr. Anderson helped me with that interview. And he's a proponent of this. But I started asking questions, especially when you're handing your hard assets over to a state-run anything. Especially if you've got the ability to hold it yourself and you've got you've got a wise wolf, like you've got somebody to deal with, and those off-ramps, those on-ramps, those off-ramps to get in and out of fiat currency through precious metals. If you've got that and you can keep it, and you're limiting counterparty risk, folks, when you do that. The banking industry fiercely opposed HB 1056, fearing disruption to the fractional reserve system that profits from fiat currency. The Independent Bankers Association of Texas called the bill potentially harmful, though it softened its stance after amendments. Meanwhile, conservative groups like the Texas Public Policy Foundation championed it as a visionary check on federal overreach. DeRazio framed the bill in spiritual terms, citing Genesis 2, gold was God's chosen medium of commerce. Yet biblical commerce never involved handing gold to a state depository for digital credits. These are good questions. That's the same thing, okay, would I do it? No. But I'm also a gold and silver precious metals dealer. I live and breathe it. I don't see the need for that. I wouldn't hold, a certain amount over there either. Texas's move didn't happen in a vacuum, with states like Utah and Arkansas already recognizing gold as legal tender. Texas has gone further by building infrastructure, a step that dovetails with its broader independence ambitions. The Texas Bullion Depository, opened in 2018, was initially built as a way to repatriate state gold from New York and London. Now it's morphing into a monetary hub for citizens to turn their precious metal resources. For secession advocates, this is critical. A future Republic of Texas would need its own currency, but not really. The first Texas currency, the Republic of Texas, set up after 1836, Sam Houston would sign the notes individually, like the notes from the Bank of Texas, from the Treasury, and he used to authenticate it. He used his cufflinks, and he had these cufflinks made after his first pistol duel, and he had a duel where you could just die. I mean, that was back then. There was honor was questioned, and then you just pistols at dawn. And he had a vision in the morning because he felt like he was going to be okay, because he heard a rooster crow and a dog bark, and it was like a barking dog and a rooster, and he would roll those cufflinks over on the paper. This is a little different. Yeah, freedom or facade. This is a good. I'm glad that they're asking the questions and not just hopping on a bandwagon. I mean, I think that you start involving the state in housing your bullion, no matter how good the technology is. I just like private. I like decentralized. HB 1056 is undeniably groundbreaking, offering Texas a hedge against inflation and federal monetary abuse, but the fine print matters. Converting physical gold into state-managed digital currency may serve and solve short-term usability issues while creating long-term dependency. True monetary freedom requires direct ownership and spendability, not a system where the state acts as a middleman. In the end, is this plan to slowly confiscate gold and other precious metals, centralizing control? The answer will not just shape Texas's economy, but the very definition of financial liberty. Well, that's a good question. And there's so much Look, you just mentioned in the article, you had Utah and Arkansas and Tennessee's still working on the infrastructure for their own depository and other things, making gold and silver legal tender. This is a good thing. And the debate about who holds it, I think that's always critical. As people ask me about the gold standard itself and why, if I support that, and I just say we already have one. We don't need the currency to be we already have a gold standard. It's the gold standard. It's gold. It's the price. It's set. It's a worldwide recognized standard. I don't care where you are. If you're in Boston or Bangladesh or Beaumont, Texas, it's the same. That's spot price. All right. Well, let's go to I want to recognize the chat. I always forget that. It's good to see you guys. I see Karen Carpenter over and the YouTube chat. Good to see you. And then let's see, we've got former Star Trek writing fellow is over on YouTube. That's good to see you. Good to see you, Guard. Harp says, nope, give me gold, silver, or give me death. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I'm still got my YouTube channel for now. That's good, isn't it? And then over on Rumble, let me pull this up real quick. Let's see. Twisted Communicate, does this Texas Gold digital affect Wise Wolf as a business at all? I don't know. I would assume so on some level, but we're leaning mean. We'll roll with it. Karen Carpenter asks, Tony, what is your take on the selling of public lands that have been proposed several times in various ways of late? Well, I think you have to be careful if the government holds massive swaths, especially out west. That had a lot to do with Teddy Roosevelt. And as long as it's not going to some supranational or international body, like it's, some straw buyer for the UN that wants to rewild everything, I like things being offered up to real people. But I think there has to be, it can't just be an open-ended thing, because then you just have the Chinese come and buy stuff, or some foreign entity, or some, like in Texas, you have the toll roads are owned by the government of Spain for a retirement fund. You wonder, why do you pay all the taxes if it's just going to be, you're going to be billed for by the government of Spain? Karen Carpenter says, Boston, Bangladesh, or Beaumont sounds like a country song. Yeah, I got that from, well, not those exact things, but all the bees. I got that from Christopher Hitchens. I forget what, I think he used Belgrade and a few others. It was all the bees, Bahrain, I think. Let's see. Yeah, I'll have to look into whether or not that affects me as a business. And I think, there's all the sorts of changes that will affect Wise Wolf as a business. But as long as we're serving the public, my mission has always been, my mission statement still remains, which is to help as many people as I can get in and out of the fiat currency system most efficiently at the best possible price. And that's one of the reasons why we added the Bitcoin side of Wise Wolf, which I think is important, because it's another avenue. That's another thing that's happening in this space. We basically have the intersection of history, folks, is this collision. As I mentioned today on the David Knight show, there's a tweet up on Gold Telegraph, and I think he nailed it. It's like there's the historical collision between infinite and finite. And it's happening right now like this. It's going to create a new world and new pricing structure for everything, because that's what all the governments of the world do. They get into a problem. They own the printing press, and they just hit, money printer go burr, and it just spits out new currency units, which devalues them because they are backed by nothing. And then, you wonder why the prices of things change. Speaking of which, let me cover this article, and then it's never enough time, by the way, on the show. I love the hour show. Somebody mentioned earlier that I wasn't over on WWCR. I'm going to find out why. That's we're supposed to be live over there. I'll have to find out what's going on WWCR. I'm supposed to be. All right. Let's jump into this piece. This is another explanation. Just always keep your mind sharp on what money is. This is Zero Hedge and an article by out of the Mises Institute, Douglas French. It says, silver price shows what government has done to our money. You hear about gas prices every day. So he says, the president brags that the price per gallon has dropped to $1.99 in some places. Says, after paying over $4 here in Las Vegas, I wonder where he is talking about. He ran on bringing down prices at the pump, saying drill, baby, drill constantly at his rallies. But in real terms, gas prices have gone down. A line from the Wall Street Journal piece illustrates the point. Silver, and this is something that we need to continue to watch because I think this is the revaluation of commodities. Silver's rally has made it worth the effort to sift through coin jars looking for old dimes, quarters, and half dollars. The melt value of a 25-cent coin minted before 1965, that's a quarter, when they were made of silver, is more than $6.50. That's the melt value, folks. That's not even any intrinsic value or face for premium. Says, I'm old enough to remember 25-cent gas. And someone pumped the gas for you and checked your oil and the pressure in your tires. During lunch with an old friend, he told me his kids don't know what cash is, let alone pre-1965 quarters. No wonder monetary matters don't really matter to Americans, especially young folk. No one seems concerned about the constant devaluation of the dollar. High prices, they blame on whoever's president or corporate greed. The idea that the problem is the constant creation of more money escapes them. My God, and isn't that so true? It's no more, and look, you would look no further than something like the socialists being nominated in New York. I mean, they want to do a state-run grocery stores, state-run this or that, state-run everything, right? Because the state does a great job. I mean, have you seen, like when people would come to this country from places like the Soviet Union, and you had that famous debate. I need to get a picture. That's one of the great iconic pictures. Nixon planned that when he put his finger right in Khrushchev's chest at the kitchen debate. That's so just genius, like just had to get a just nice tap there. But that was such an iconic moment. But they would like just marvel at the amount of choices that we had and what was on the shelf and what was brought to market. And they would stand in line for hours to get their allocated bread and things. But you think that, well, we got to have, it's the market that's doing that. What did we do immediately after going off the gold standard? Well, we did price control. Can't raise the prices. We do price control, executive by fiat, executive order. We do price control. It doesn't work. As Ludwig von Mises wrote, what people today call inflation is not inflation, i.e. the increase in the quantity of money and money substitutes, but the general rise in commodity prices and wage rates, which is the inevitable consequence of inflation. The semantic innovation is by no means harmless. Yeah, it's like you get this debate, we have to raise the minimum wage. We got to take it. It's got to be 15. It's got to be 20. It used to be the debate, we're going to have $5 or we're going to have one at all. But you're constantly going to have to move that bar because your purchasing power diminishes. And by the way, what this article is showing is something I've said for a long time. Not only can you not get the same, let's say you're making minimum wage today or whatever, you're making $20 an hour and trying to eke by. Well, in the 1960s, if you got paid, $1.50 and you just had silver quarters, as we've seen in this article, that's like making $30 an hour or more in purchasing power. That's what happens when you got the manipulation of currency. The Wall Street Journal reports of people selling silver and some that are buying. Daniel Hertzer, who owns businesses that buy and sell estate jewelry in White Plains, New York, said his phone's ringing frequently with customers eager to sell jewelry and flatware that they inherited or no longer need. They'd rather turn it into cash, he said. cash that's value will disintegrate. Well, I'm in both sides of that business. I mean, if you know anything about me, I buy and sell. I'm happy to serve the public. That way we give you the highest possible prices for things that you sell to me. And then, I'll turn right back around and sell those metals to someone else. And I have that need. I have to sometimes sell products. I have to sell things to raise capital. I'm in that same boat with you. As a matter of fact, I was just looking for, I need to bring this on air sometime. We found this 1920s era trophy that somebody sold me. It's complete solid sterling, and it's so weird what's written on it. My son found that out. I need to polish it. I need to do like a real live YouTube thing or something and polish it up. It's worth restoring, but it's worth like $800 or actually more. Now it's probably worth way over $1,000 because of the increase in the price of precious metals. So silver is doing that thing where it's revaluating, and I think even showing some of its true monetary strength. And gasoline, it actually has gone down if you measure it against what silver would have bought, right? Early 1960s. And that's because we were on the petrodollar for so long. There's been an increase in the output. And macro, if you looked at what happened over the weekend, even with the Iranians saying they were going to close the Strait of Hormuz and the crude went down. Crude oil went down. No, by the way, almost nothing happened in the markets over the weekend, it's fascinating. It's a dog that didn't bark. I often wonder, because you have to, this is a show on not just finance, it's parapolitics as well. Parapolitics is something, I don't just talk politics. I don't do that. That's make-believe. And partisanship is where ideas go to die. It's where, it's where discernment goes to die. Individuality, clear thought goes to die. But I looked at that this weekend and thought, well, I remember back in 2019, at the end of 2019, you had the largest exodus of CEOs in history, just like inexplicably, by the way, this mass exodus of CEOs from multinational corporations started pulling those golden parachutes in the last quarter of 2019. And I thought, well, this is really weird. So I started thinking something is up. And of course, 2020 was around there. That's what it was. I mean, there's a lot of times maybe they don't get read in completely, but you have to understand, folks, the ties between intelligence, espionage, intelligence, and multinational corporations like the banking combines that exist, the consortiums, these flow together. There's linkage between the two. So always be aware of that. So the market's not moving. I thought that was perhaps a tell. All right. Well, I want to get to where I cover everything today. Let's see. I don't know if we can do Don's article as well. There's one other story. Before we get to that, just a little bit more news, and then I want to go over Don's article because Melissa brought something to my attention, and I want to bring it to yours for the same reason. Don't really know what it means, but it's I think it tells a story. It tells something. Perhaps it'll sit with you in the way I'm ruminating over it. This is an interesting piece. This is, and I had to do a couple of different searches to look, but this is up from Gizmodo. And it's just a little headline. And perhaps you wouldn't think anything of it, but there's something interesting in it. And it's Silicon Valley executives join the Army as officers, but they don't have to attend boot camp. The tech industry is fully on board, but the rank and file won't have to do time as grunts. The U.S. military recently announced that 4 executives from some of the top tech companies in Silicon Valley have joined the Army Reserve as direct commissioned officers. This move is a part of a push to speed up the adoption of technology in the military, but as the news outlet Task and Purpose points out, it's pretty unusual. Yeah, it's pretty unusual, as in never. The Army said that in a press release that 4 executives are Shimon Sakar at Palantir, Andrew Bosworth, CTO at Meta, Kevin Wheel, Chief Product Officer at OpenAI, and Bob McGrew, an advisor in Thinking Machines Lab and former Chief Research Officer for OpenAI. The 4 men are being commissioned at the high rank of Lieutenant Colonel, which I believe is that an 05? I worked for a lieutenant colonel, and it took him, he was enlisted for 6 years, and then he went to OCS, Officer Candidate School at Fort Benning. And then it took him his entire career to reach that rank. The men will get to skip the usual process of taking a direct commission course at Fort Benning, Georgia, and they won't need to complete the Army fitness test. The Army didn't respond to questions emailed Tuesday, but said in a statement published on the website, their swearing in is just the start of a bigger mission to inspire more tech pros to serve without leaving their careers. Yeah, and of course, it gives you kind of a history of Silicon Valley with its ties to Washington going back to the Reagan administration. Yeah, this is interesting. And it has to do with I think, ties to Palantir and this technocratic influence in the Trump administration that we've seen, but also very, very odd. This is Bosworth and his buddies can be a bit more open about their goals now that Trumpism has been more normalized in the president's second term, but they also run the risk of hitching their wagons and the reputation of the companies they represent to a president who's famous for acting recklessly. After all, this is the guy who just a couple of days ago told Tehran, a city of 10 million people, to evacuate, and is heavily suggesting he's going to get the U.S. into a war with Iran. That's how the article ends. But it's an unprecedented move. It doesn't make, why not just bring somebody in as a consultant? I think there's an underlying issue here. So just a little something to watch. It's a isolated incident, but just imagine how you would feel if you worked your whole life to get to a level where you just somebody walks in. Now you have that same kind of commissioning thing for doctors and legal and JAG and stuff like that, but they all still have to do the proper channels. This is just handed down. There must be a reason that they have to be a commissioned officer of some kind. Something is underlying that, just something to think about. Sometimes my job is just to bring things to you that you might find interesting and let you decide for yourself what is news about that. All right, let's jump into this article. This is a good way to end this piece by my friend Don Jeffries. It has so many good points. And I didn't even get to where I was plugging today. I cover way too many articles on the show, but we pushed a lot into the hour. Oh, Don always does a magnificent job of summing things up in his way through the lens of hidden history. Again, LouRockwell.com. First world bombs from third world Trumpenstein. Says, I was on RB Ham's Beyond the Pale podcast recently when I said that it looked like Donald Trump was giving us another of his ingenious head fakes and was pulling back from Iran. literally at that moment, RB put the breaking news up on the screen. It brought back memories of Syria when Israel ordered Trump to attack them. That's why I don't make predictions. There I was, left looking like Nellie Connolly after she told JFK, well, Mr. President, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you, seconds before shots were fired by someone other than Lee Harvey Oswald. I don't know if this means we will become truly involved, but I hope Trump will replay his actions on Syria when it was one and one done thing. Well, one and done 2 times. That's the thing about Trumpenstein. He plays the part of an effective bully, but when Israel talks, he listens. Supposedly, the bombs eviscerated 4 well-known nuclear sites in Iran. Expect that many of us, including our own intelligence agencies just a few months ago, don't believe there are any nuclear sites in Iran. For all we know, our big, beautiful bombs killed a bunch of civilians. It's not like we haven't slaughtered civilians countless times dating back to 1846 in the Mexican-American War. He says, as Marjorie Taylor Greene pointed out, no one voted for Trump so that he could attack Iran. No MAGA voter wanted to make Iran obsolete. Tulsi Gabbard embarrassed herself by backtracking her earlier accurate comments on Iran's nuclear capability. Maybe RFK Jr. can give her Rabbi Shmuley's phone number. We knew Trump would do better and do whatever Israel said, the guy that streets named after him there. But at the heart of MAGA is an America First philosophy. No more senseless wars, as Trump has called them. Becoming entangled in Iran or anywhere else completely discredits the blustery leader of that movement. Trump is in his 5th year as president. Where's the infrastructure upgrade? And what is Doge auditing now? When will Kash Patel make his first arrest? Caroline Leavitt is lovely and Pam Bondi looks great for her age. That may be enough for Trumpenstein, but not for his voters. Well, I suppose we have to show off all that artillery sometimes when you have $1 trillion defense budget. People expect you to drop a few bombs here and there. Collateral damage, lots of collateral damage is baked into the equation. We mastered the art of destroy and rebuild during World War II, the good war that so many Americans wax nostalgic about. That's what they're anxious for. World War III. Look how cool the last war was. Maybe that will cause an uptick in the marriage rates. Soft soy boys marrying their tough, tattooed gender fluids right before they get shipped off to battle. Bruce Springsteen seems really sold on the deep state now, so maybe he can play the part of Glenn Miller and write the soundtrack for the new world conflict. Lots of elderly rock stars would soon sign on as well. Our view of patriotism was born with the first 2 world wars. Uncle Sam says, loose lips sink ships. Oh, he's so right about that. I think really too that people are just desensitized so much. We don't have the same views that we did, previous generations are very skeptical of war and getting into them. And then people vote, by the way. I mean, we voted to stay out of these things, but it just happens anyway. World War II was the last war that was declared by Congress. They haven't followed their constitutional obligations since. Despite all the nonstop, forever interventions and occupations in far-flung, much smaller lands, Jeanette Rankin was the only member of Congress to vote against declaring war against Japan. She had to have a police escort out of the Capitol for her own protection. He spells it, Americans don't take kindly to those who don't vote for war. Rankin was a real lefty, an early feminist, but they stopped inviting her to all the best cocktail parties after she held fast to her principles. You have to love a woman who said, you can no more win a war than you can win an earthquake. It's a stupid way of resolving things. And we wonder why they picketed Harry Truman instead of Jeanette to be on our counterfeit fiat currency. Sorry, it was Harriet Tubman. Sorry, I thought they said Harry Truman. That is true. Yeah. There's another side story. I want to talk to Don about Jeanette Rankin. I'm pretty sure she voted. She was a Montana congresswoman. I believe I read in the biography of Sam Rayburn, because it's been like 23 years ago, that she was. She also voted against World War I. I need to look that up and talk to Don about it. Jeanette is more forgotten now than the great anti-war activist General Smedley Butler. So what lifelong journalists for the state Tom Brokaw called the greatest generation did their thing? It says, and he talks about the atrocities of troops in the Pacific in World War II and other things. And if you want to really dig into some of that, he's got a great breakdown of that in Hidden History. And in the second follow-up, Crimes and Cover-Ups. Yeah, this is where I was looking at there was Operation Keyhole, overseen by the Allied commander Dwight D. Eisenhower. Lots of innocent Germans died, but Ike had to start his political career somehow. You can read more about what a keyhole is like they tie you to the ship and then drag you behind it, and it would you float in and out underneath the ship, just barely having enough oxygen. They would do that to those certain unfortunates. It says, we've done a lot ever since in all those undeclared wars we fought for absolutely no logical reason, of course. It's national security thing you wouldn't understand. So to be fair, bombing Iran for no reason is not any more ridiculous than fighting contained wars in Korea and Vietnam with demarcation zones and no goals of strategy. The right used to call them no-win wars. With the first Gulf War, we established a continuing presence in the Middle East. Sure, burying surrendering soldiers alive by plowing them over with their trenches seems harsh, but war is hell. As the satanic would-be serial killer William T. Sherman once said, if we have to bury you alive to make you stop hating our freedom, we'll do it. And then, of course, there were the ugly videos from the then Bradley Manning, published by WikiLeaks, bombing civilians for sport, playing soccer with decapitated heads. Support the troops, says Don. Iran represents no less a threat to us than Iraq or Afghanistan did, or Syria, or poor Yemen. An entire wedding party in Yemen was murdered during the administration of the beloved Barack Obama. That probably sealed the Nobel Peace Prize for him, assassinating American citizen Anwar al-Awlaki with a drone strike, and then following up that with the drone killing of his 16-year-old son was just icing on the cake. So if our troops do become involved and start shoving things up the rear ends of male Iranian prisoners, as they did so prolifically during our struggles with Iraq, it's keeping with our military strategy. You know what you love about Don? He truly is like one of the with a conscience. Those writers that stays consistent on this stuff. I have to try and find humor in this. How can I write seriously about the situation? Iran hasn't invaded anyone in 300 years, or maybe it's 3,000. At any rate, it's been a very long time. They don't represent the slightest threat to the United States. If those quote-unquote sleeper cells really existed, they would have taken down our laughably outdated power grids after some 1.5 million Iraqis, including an estimated 565,000 children, died as a result of our embargo. You'd think that any self-respecting terrorist would be compelled to act in such a case. but not a single suicide bomber has done anything in order to seek vengeance. America has shown that it can fight any tiny country in the Middle East to a stalemate. Well, except for Israel. That's who we're fighting for, after all. And when we back a country by proxy like Ukraine, we'll work on their infrastructure for them and help secure their border. We just won't upgrade our own infrastructure or secure our own southern border. So here we are with a world-class military-industrial complex. Lots of shiny planes, tanks, and bombs. But we meet every definition of a third world country here at home. Infrastructure neglected for more than 60 years. Check. Massive and widening disparity of wealth? Check. Homeless people camped out in tents and defecating in the streets? Check. Massive corruption at all levels, from school boards to federal representatives? Check. Untrustworthy electoral process? Check. State control, mass media? Check. Public officials never held accountable for their actions? Check. Fraud and money laundering revealed but ignored? Check. Fractional reserve banking system that creates money out of thin air and charges imaginary interest on it? Check. Court historians who lie about our history? Check. Oh, just like the Soviet Union. That's funny. Public education system that has produced untold numbers of illiterates? Check. Well, I find that to be where at least a snapshot of the events post Saturday. And again, you can find Don's work at donaldjeffries.media. He's also on a show that we do together called America Unplugged, and you can find that on this channel, on the America Unplugged channel over on Rumble, every Saturday, 12 Eastern at noon. And then Don has I Protest on Fridays. I'll be helping him tomorrow. All right. Well, we got through that week, folks, and we'll see what lies ahead. I'll be here next week. We'll be live. We'll try to break down the headlines and decode the dystopia together. I've got lots of things going on I want to plug before I end the transmission. But if you're looking at, like I just read that article on silver, looking at what's happening with the fiat system, all that stuff's still intact. I mean, if you're wanting to dollar cost average, get out of that system, start trading those Luciferian bankster notes for real actual money, which is gold, silver, or Bitcoin, then we are your company. And looking at the price of gold right now, $3,332, $3,332. Luciferian bankster notes make up a troy ounce of the yellow metal. Silver is at $36.69. I believe the gold silver ratio, I checked it this morning, is about 90 ounces of silver to make 1 ounce of gold. And that's never been the case in all of recorded history until this time. So I think that's part of the revaluation process that we'll see very soon. So wolfpack.gold. If you go to wolfpack.gold, we can get you in. I'm just as low as $50 a month. And promo code 1776 gets you some free silver. You can also buy one time. You can just buy one time. And you can use Bitcoin at no fee. We're the only no free broker in America when you use Bitcoin. I was looking to see the price of Bitcoin. Let's do a real time here. Let's do Bitcoin news, Bitcoin price. I wanted to check that out. I think we're just right above 106,000. Yeah, 107 actually. It's up since the beginning of the broadcast. $107,162.93 for a Bitcoin. I think that's another start of an entire. This is the collision of infinite versus finite, and that's where it's part of the dialectic, folks. Part of what's going on, this cyclical part of history. This is the historical forces that are meeting right here. All right. Also, and I've neglected to do this, but there's so much going on. If you if you've seen me advertise it before, but I'm going to start talking about my other sponsor. I've been with them for 23 years, and that's Legal Shield. I forgot to it's important that I tell the audience about it because of what it does. But, as far as unlimited consultation, you pick up the phone, talk to an attorney anytime. You can get, and there's no billing. It's unlimited. You can have your documents reviewed. You can send them your tickets. You get pulled over. Like it's a law firm for the price of a cup of coffee a day. It's like $30 a month. And you get audit protection, lawsuit protection. I've got all the bells and whistles, even for my business. But you can go to peoplesprotectionplan.com, peoplesprotectionplan.com. Check that out. I forgot to plug the last year. So please do that. I'll be talking about that more. And such a great sponsor. So check that out. See what it can do for you and your family. I've been with them, like I said, for 23 plus years. Great product, and we need it more than ever in this climate. So you guys take care of each other. I'll be back next week with Beans the Brave. End of transmission.